Black. We're going to turn to tonight's, or at least part of tonight's Out in the Open panel. Pulitzer Prize winning columnist Clarence Page is here. He raced all the way here from Chicago. He's getting mic'd up. He'll join us in just a second. He happens to be a member of the Chicago Tribune's editorial board and author of Showing My Color: Impolite Essays on Race and Identity. Tara Wall is a senior advisor to the Republican National Committee. Rachel Maddow is a talk show host on the Air America radio network. Glad to have two-thirds of you with us tonight. So, Tara, what is wrong with saying to a black person, you're articulate?
Well, nothing, really.
Is it racist?
I've been called articulate, and I think it's in the context in which you say it, and I think, but you also have to keep in mind the person to whom it came from, and in Senator Biden's case, I mean, he has a history of making racially charged remarks, so I think in that context, it could seem offensive to some, but generally speaking, not necessarily.
But I have heard African American after African American, particularly over the weekend, sounding off, saying that this is absolutely an insensitive and outrageous thing to call them.
I think I was insulted by it from Joe Biden. I think it was inappropriate for Joe Biden to say it. I was also insulted by it when the president made the same comment in an interview the day after this whole storm blew up around Joe Biden. It's insulting because it implies that it's a remarkable trait for an African American to be articulate. In the same way that, you know, in meeting a gay man, for example, you'd say, you know, I didn't feel threatened by him at all. I would allow him to be near my children. That's only remarkable if you think that, in general, that group is not represented by that comment.
Yeah. Does it depend on who is using the word articulate?
You have to look at the context in which it's said. Biden didn't say anything about how Obama, you know, how his record was or how he would contribute to being, you know, the president of the United States. He talked about he was clean and articulate. But to say someone is articulate, I've been described that way. People say you did a great job, you got your message across, you are articulate. That's not offensive. How is that offensive? What's more offensive to me is when, you know, I've grown up and, you know, I've been called by other kids, African American kids, I've been called white because they say I speak white. That's more offensive. What does that mean? But to say someone is articulate, if you're talking about someone getting their point across, that's different than just saying, gee, you're awfully articulate. Then that could be offensive.
Let's welcome to our panel Clarence Page.
Hi.
Sorry about that slight delay there.
The articulate Clarence Page.
Yeah,
Yes,
well, I think you are.
Yes.
Now, if I were to call you that, would you view that as a racist comment?
Well, it sounds like
you're a guy who's well-spoken.
Like, yeah, you're so articulate, ... for a black man. You know, that's what it sounds like.
That isn't the way I would mean it, though.
No, but the way I hear it. And that's why we have divisions about race and ethnicity in the country. My Jewish friends don't like hearing, gee, some of my best friends are Jewish. My Native American friends don't like hearing, gee, you know, I've got some Indian in the family. Or my Asian friends, you know, gee, how long have you been in the country? Your English is so good. You know, these are the kind of lines that are like fingernails on a blackboard for various people.
Let me put up something on the screen that comedian D.L. Hewley said about the word articulate. Subtle words like this are more insidious. It's the last vestiges of racism that are hard to get rid of. What am I allowed to say to you if I think you are facile, quick on your feet,
well, that's the
didn't panic when you didn't have a mic, and you know you're going to have to...
That's the sad thing about this, because we need more racial dialogue in the country. We need more honest conversations, candid conversations, and if people are going to be afraid of speaking out, then we just have the same kind of problem we have now.
Speaking out? What if I want to compliment you? What is off limits? If
Joe Biden hadn't been running for office, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now.
And that's where the absurdity comes in. Is, I mean, where do we end and begin on words that are banned and words that are not banned? I mean, you have to use some common sense, yes, but are we going to ban the entire English language because some folks are offended by certain words?
We're not going to ban anything, but I do think that when our language reflects our prejudices, when we don't talk about our prejudices and our language reflects it, it's a point that draws people's attention. It did bother me when President Bush said it. It did bother me when Joe Biden said it. And it's not that I don't like the word articulate. They could have said Barack Obama's wicked smart, and I wouldn't have batted an eye. But there's something about that speaking to our prejudices that we need to acknowledge and get out in the open instead of doing it on the slide.
All right, so I'm not going to be comfortable using the A word anymore. But what can I?
But it's not offensive when it comes from you, because the intent is not there. It is offensive when someone sitting there and out of the blue would say to me, look at me and say, boy, you're awfully articulate. Now, this is the first time you've heard me speak. You don't know anything about me. What are you saying? Then it becomes an issue of, yes, there's some sensitivity there. But coming from, you know, generally you speaking, saying this is an articulate person, I describe my father as articulate. In fact, when I describe him to people, I talk about a lot of things, but the one thing I'm most proud of him is because he prides himself on how articulate he is, and he is very articulate.
But help us better understand what we're allowed to say that won't offend blacks.
You know, just think about, would I be saying this if this person were white? I mean, I remember back when Alan Keyes was running for president, and a lot of white conservatives I know were saying, I like that Alan Keyes, he's so articulate, meaning he's not Jesse Jackson.
Yeah.
You know, it was coded language.
Yeah. And if that's all I got to say about him, yeah,
exactly,
absolutely.
Exactly. You know, same with Condoleezza Rice, I hear it all the time, you know, and it seems rather transparent and insincere. You know, I always try to think about not what somebody's saying, but how are they saying it, and is there any hidden meaning here, you know?
Right. Yes, exactly.
Let's move on to another controversy, this one also involving Senator Obama, this time over something one of his longtime supporters is saying. Emil Jones Jr., the president of the Illinois State Senate and one of Obama's political mentors, is questioning whether black Democrats still owe Bill and Hillary Clinton their support.
I do not feel that I would have to go year after year being supportive of individual or their spouse or their daughter when I have my own son who is equally qualified to be president. I'm going to support my son.
Back to our panel now. Do blacks have an obligation to support what some consider their son, Barack Obama?
I think that's the wrong question. The question people are really asking is my vote going to be wasted, or is it going to count if I vote for Obama? Same thing happened when Harold Washington ran in Chicago, speaking of Illinois, back in '83, when I made my bones as a political reporter on TV, Paula, back at the old station you used to work at, in fact. And you know, Harold Washington had to convince black voters first that he could beat the Chicago machine, a tall order. He'd been trounced by them in '77. That was the first thing he had to do. Then he moved out and reached out to white voters and was able to eventually win. Obama's people, I've talked to him, talked to his folks and all, and they understand this as well. You know, half the country doesn't know enough about Barack Obama to answer whether up or down to a pollster right now. So a lot of opinion is still being formed, and I think that's the real question to ask.
What obligation do you think some blacks feel to pay back a debt of gratitude to Bill and Hillary Clinton? A lot of African Americans I speak to think that he and his presidency vastly improved their lives.
Well, you know, talking about wasted votes, I mean, I frankly think that if they vote Democrat, that's a wasted vote. I'd prefer they vote Republican, but
okay, your
but for the
are out
there. But given that, you know, I would say, listen, no, you know, this, I think actually this is good for Democrats. It gives an opportunity to not take the black vote for granted, as they've done year after year after year, over and over again. Obama doesn't have a lock on the black vote. Hillary Clinton doesn't have a lock on the black vote. No one, I think people, you can't vote for a person based on race. You have to vote on the issues and where they lie, where you're.
But don't you wish Colin Powell had run in 95, 96?
Well, I wish Condoleezza Rice would run now.
Right.
But,
I mean, Republicans wish they had this kind of a candidate, just like Democrats have wished all along. That's part of the thrill that Democrats have about Obama.
And I think it'll be a good challenge for them.
But
absolutely.
Will America ever move beyond voting along the color of people's skin?
Well, for president, we've never really had the opportunity, other than Alan Keyes' candidacy.
But you certainly have on the state level and the national level for Senate races.
When it comes down to it, the fact is that minority groups, there is a value to minority groups to seeing a member of your minority in a position of leadership. There is a value to that. There is a value to seeing Colin Powell as Secretary of State, Condoleezza Rice as National Security Advisor and Secretary of State. Those things matter. It matters that there's a woman Speaker of the House in Nancy Pelosi right now. It matters for what kids of that minority group, or in the case of Nancy Pelosi, girls, can imagine themselves being. It matters. It's not everything, though. And I think if Condoleezza Rice ran in 2008, I actually think she probably would get a large part of the black vote, because I don't think she's shown herself to represent black interests very well. But it is enough to make people pay attention to her, and her candidacy would be important.
All right, panel, stay right there. We got a lot more to talk about today.